First of all, it runs for about $60 with shipping and everything. It's very cheaply made. It's made out of foam. It's a very strong, firm foam. Makes it very light. As I said, it's very cheaply made. You can find a few flaws when you get it. I noticed a little bit, the molding back here is a little off. Big thing that you'll notice is the stickers. A lot of the stickers, when it comes out of the box, haven't been attached very well. So you have to go around the whole plane and push with your finger or with something and get all the stickers, all the decals back on. Along the edge especially, you'll see a lot of bubbling. Just go ahead and press those in. Nothing real major. Based on the research that I've done online, most standard RC planes, they'll have a receiver module and then a separate speed control module. It's called electronic speed control, or ESC. This plane, everything is integrated into one chip. Let me show you here this other plane this was the first one that I had that I crashed a whole bunch of times. I really got some good use out of it, but finally I flew it into a lake and I fried the electronics, so I've used it for parts. But let's see if you can see here, this is the basic brain of the plane. It's just a small little chip here. It integrates everything into this speed control for the rear servo. It's all included in here. So it's very, very basic, which which is a plus. But also the downside is if things break, like as what happened with me, you can't just go out and buy another electronic speed control or receiver. Not very replaceable. You just got to go and buy a whole new plane. But that's the control right there. So it's a 2-channel plane. You have speed and you have rudder. But you'll be surprised at the control you can get because of the dihedral. If you look at the plane head on, you have a pretty good angle here, so the plane stabilizes itself well. So if you give it full power, the plane will climb, take off the power, and it does a pretty good job gliding down. And then with your rudder, you can go ahead and steer it. Whatever direction you give it rudder, you'll find that the plane will actually bank in that direction as well because of the dihedral. So this is the rear servo for the rudder, and very light, very cheaply made. And I don't think it's actually a true servo because it doesn't actually send information back and forth. But all it is, it's inside. It's a tiny motor. You can see there, it's a very, very tiny motor that sits. It sits inside, and it controls a gear that basically moves back and forth. So it just kind of does this. Back and forth. That's it. There is no range basically. If you give right rudder, it'll go right. If you give left rudder, it'll go full left. So you just kind of, as you're flying, gotta control that back and forth as best as you can. But you'll be surprised at the control you can get out of it. So that's the rear servo. I had to do a few mods to the plane out of the box. Because I don't have a lot of experience, I had to learn from trial and error. But basically, the first mod that I did was the plane comes with a cowling that goes right here on the front. This is the cowling here that covers up the front and goes onto the plane. And another thing that I took off that I didn't use is this nose cone. Basically, little foam nose cone. The reason why I don't use these is because once I started crashing a lot, I noticed that the plane, when it crashes, this bar here, let me show you on the broken model actually. This bar here, right on the tip where the propeller gear sits and connects to the motor drive, this bar kept bending down. So if you left the cowling on and the cone, it made it very difficult to, after each flight, after each crash, to go ahead and adjust that. So I just went ahead and took that off, and whenever the plane would crash, I would go ahead and adjust that. One thing that you have to pay attention is you have to make sure that this doesn't bend, because if this starts bending down, if this pin starts bending down, then there will be increased pressure on the motor, and you'll start noticing that the motor actually starts overheating. And I noticed that one day when it crashed, you know, I went to go ahead and adjust it, and it was super hot. I mean, it burned my fingers. And the ultimate effect of that, if you can see, I don't know if you'll be able to see, is all this foam. The motor gets so hot that it starts melting all this foam, and what you'll end up with is a very loose, you can see in there, a very loose motor. So by omitting the cowling and the cone, you can go ahead after each crash, check and make sure that there's not a lot of pressure on that motor, and you can just go ahead, you know, give it a good spin like this, you know, and if it gives you a few good spins, you'll know that it's pretty loose. Also, you can look at the gears and make sure that the teeth are flush with the drive gear, but not too tight. So you want to make sure you pay attention to that. One of the bigger mods that I did is I noticed that the plane was very back heavy, and I went online and did some research on how to balance a plane. And apparently, what you do is you measure the wing chord, which is the distance from here to here, and if you hold the plane on 2 fingers like this and try to balance the plane on 2 fingers, the balance point, according to the websites I found, should be no further back than about 1/3 of the wing chord, which is the full length. And I noticed with this plane out of the box, I'm sure, you know, partly because I took this cowling and stuff off, but I noticed that the balance point was about halfway back the wing. So what ends up happening is when you fly the plane and you start it, you'll notice it'll want to climb drastically. I mean, you know, even if you give it a little bit of power, you'll notice the plane will want to climb. And if you take off the power, you'll notice the plane will stall, and it'll fall down and then climb, and then stall, fall down, and climb. And what you'll get is almost like a wave, like this, you know, all the way down. So that's a good sign that your plane is too back heavy. So what I ended up having to do was, instead of using the housing here for the battery, I actually cut out a hole here, and I placed the battery all the way in the front, and using 2 paper clips, I don't know if you'll be able to see it there, but 2 paper clips, I just used 2 paper clips here to hold that battery in place in flight. And then, of course, you know, the not so pretty part is the cable will have to stick out. But eventually what you'll get is you'll get a nice balance, and you'll see if I hold it up, I'm about a third of the way back on the wing chord, which is about right there. And you'll notice a humongous difference when you fly the plane. It won't want to climb drastically, and it'll stay very steady and straight. The rudder, it doesn't have a standard hinge as you'll see on higher end remote control planes. It's basically just a piece of tape that holds the rudder here. And then you'll notice is that when you hit the servo, and you start you know, giving it left-right rudder, it wobbles drastically. So what I did was, I'm sure you won't be able to see this, but right at the top here, I opened up a staple, and I inserted the staple into the stabilizer and up into the rudder, giving it a little extra control, almost like a hinge. So now when I give right-left rudder, you'll see it's much more control than before. Before, the rudder kind of like wobbled like this. So that was another mod. What else? I ended up reinforcing the wings with tape. I used 2-inch clear tape. What I do is I run all the way down here around the front and under the underside on both sides of the wings, because as I'll show you on the old wing, that's the first point it's going to break. Here was the first break that I had, and I reinforced it with JB weld, and I put the tape, and then I ended up breaking this side of the wing. Let's see if you can see the crack right down there. And then I ended up using crazy glue there with tape. And once I did that and I taped it, you know, the wing, I've had plenty of crashes. The wing never broke on me again. So I figured on this one, on the new one, I'll just go ahead and tape it right out of the box. One of the bigger mods that I did is using the parts of the old plane. I went ahead and I got some high intensity LEDs. And I used the power switch from the previous plane, and I added a second switch here, and I ran 2 high power LEDs under the wings, one right there and one on the other side. And so I'll go ahead and plug this in so you can see. And what I did was I used a red and green LED so I can now fly it at night. I'll go ahead and turn on the power and turn on the switch, and you'll see here that I have, let me go ahead and turn off this light. You'll see that I have red on that side, and I have green on this side, which makes for a pretty cool night effect. Now, one warning, if you want to fly at night, it's a lot harder than you think, even though you have the colors and you can tell which is right and left. If you fly far enough, you'll get that silhouette effect where you won't know if it's banking this way or the other way, and that's how I ended up killing the other plane. I flew it at night, and instead of turning left, I turned right, and I flew it right into the lake. So just a warning on that if you do decide to do some night flying.